RC Aerobatics podcast. I am your host, Rich Woodlow. This episode, we get to speak with Aaron Bones Garle. Aaron is an aerobatics pilot who lives in Australia. Aaron flies most disciplines of aerobatics, including IMAC, pattern, jets, and indoors. Aaron has competed in many high-profile competitions and continues to do well in them. We talk about his history, his travels and competitions, his practice routine, and what he has going on now. Thanks for listening to the show. Please like and subscribe. Good morning, Aaron. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Glad to be on.
Well, terrific. It almost seems like you're halfway across the world, believe it or not.
Yeah, funny that. It's time here's about 11:19 in the morning, and I take it it's pretty quite deep into the evening for you.
Yep, it's about 8:15 here, so a little bit different. But I really appreciate you making the time to come on.
Yeah, all good, mate.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you grew up and where you are now and whereabouts in Australia you are.
Okay, so I've grown up here in Australia. I live in a small town called Walloon. We've got 1,600 people in our town. Busiest point in our town is the local roundabout. So I've pretty much grown up here the majority of my life. Aero modelling wise, I'm a third generation aero modeller. So my grandfather flew many years ago. And then followed on obviously by my father and then myself. So for me, I've just grown up in the hobby. And I love every single bit of it. For me, over the years, it was never growing up. My father never pushed me into the hobby. It was something that I always, he would just take me to the field. He was out there flying, and it was something that I just kind of picked up. And I love the hobby. I'm very fortunate. I'm in many different aspects of the hobby. I enjoy a lot of it. However, I predominantly got into large-scale aerobatics and IMAC when I was around about 14, and for me, I'm very lucky. It's that area of the hobby has really taken me, all around the world. To go into the shootout, and obviously just coming back from the Invitational only a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, that's the hobby side of it for me. Yeah.
Terrific. Just kind of on a side note, how did you get the nickname Bones?
So when I was younger, I was really, really skinny. Like, it was almost on the verge of anorexia. And it was the sort of thing, I went to my first IMAC comp, and just one of the guys there, like, oh, you're skinny enough, we could start calling you Bones. And it just literally stuck from my very first IMAC comp. And that's going back now 15 years.
Oh, wow. Well, the first time I met you, somebody introduced you to me as Bones, so I didn't even know your first name was Aaron for a while.
Oh, look, it's that's how pretty much everyone calls it. Even my family calls me that. I usually know growing up, if my mum ever called me Aaron, I knew that I was going to be in trouble.
Well, very good. I understand at one time you lived in the States?
Yeah, so for a while there, I was based. I was working for a New Zealand-based company, but we were working on a US government contract. So I was actually living in Cartersville, Georgia, and they had me flying UAVs, doing beyond line of sight, power line inspections, and several other bits and pieces up through Colorado and then down through Texas. We did some operations up in Minnesota. So that was a few years ago. That would have been back 2017, 2018 I did that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, very good. Very good. And so now you're back in Australia and running your own company and becoming a rich millionaire, huh?
Oh, I would like to see to become a millionaire. That would be awesome. But yeah, I run my own business back home. I took over, due to a couple of issues a few years ago. I took over my father's business, buying him out, and basically turning it around. And fortunate enough of the business is relatively successful now. It's still, a long way to go, and especially during the last few years during COVID, it really it emphasised of making sure that you set up the business to go through these sort of financial hard times. Look, for me though, COVID, even though I personally and my business didn't go through much hardship, we actually grew. But you notice so many other uh, economic business out there, whether it be hospitality and several others that really suffered through those times. So for me, you've got to be very proactive of ensuring that there's going to be longevity there for your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, look, I'm pretty fortunate. Obviously with all the stresses of owning your own business, you're dealing with the day-to-day runnings, but then there's the upsides to it. Like if I want to go to Tucson, if I want to go to the Invitational, I can make them sort of things happen. It's not like I need to ask my boss for time off.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, when you got into IMAC, did was it a slow rise for you to build up your skills, or did you take to it pretty quickly, or how did you start?
Look, I probably took to it relatively quickly. So how I started was my first IMAC event that I witnessed. I visited back in Australia was an event called the DA Challenge 2007. So it was probably still to this day one of the largest IMAC events ever in the history here in Australia. So I attended that just to check it out, and there was a couple of big pilots, big names back then. So Jason Schultman came out from the US. Dave Johnson from DA came out, obviously helped support the event. We had Fraser Briggs come over from New Zealand, and back then our top pilot was Chris Brislin, an absolute phenomenal pilot. I was very fortunate enough. About 6 months leading up to it, he joined our local club, and that's where I first started really witnessing the large scale aerobatics, and seeing what it's about. Not just obviously there was. At a young age, the freestyle's what captured me. Like, wow, this is so cool. Watching it all. And then obviously that following year, I saved up my money. I got my first ever iMac model. I got my $20 a week pocket money from feeding the dogs
Yeah.
and doing the dishes, and worked about 6 months, and I saved up for my first iMac model, and had to go through and put all the gear in it, and then so it was about 7 months later, 2008. I went to my first iMac event, and from there, I believe I probably got through the ranks relatively quickly. I only did 3 comps in basic, which lasted about 3 months before I then moved into sportsman. Finished off the rest of the year 2008 in sportsman. 2009 jumped up to intermediate. Did 6 months in intermediate before they then booted me up to advanced. And then spent 12 months in advance, and then they kicked me up to unlimited. So all in the process of, would that be about 2.5 years that I got up through the ranks relatively quickly. I think for me I struggled at school. I never was one that felt like I fitted in, or even really. I struggled with self confidence back then, feeling like I was ever good at something, and the iMac for me gave me purpose and focus as if I was actually good at something. And I think that's probably a part of the reason why, obviously, I just took to it so much, and I dedicated so much of my time to it. Right through till when I finished school. So my final year of school was the first year I attended
Oh
Tucson,
wow.
which was 2011. So, and for me, school had to come first. I had to make sure I achieved all my assignments, did all my exams and everything. And yeah, and here's me flying across halfway across the world to an IMAC event. That I literally only had 4 weeks left of school when I returned, and then I was done. I was out, so I'm there at Tucson trying to practice do the contest as well as doing schoolwork
Oh
remotely.
wow.
Um, yeah, because for me, obviously school had to work, but my dreams of being able to fly at a shootout was just as important to me. So I just had to balance and make it all work.
Oh well, very good. So that was your first time competing over the states. How many times have you made it over here?
I think I added up the other day. It was around about. I think I'm up around about the 15 or 16
Oh
times I've
wow.
now been to the US. Yeah, so I've done every shootout since 2011, so it's 11, 12, 15, 17, 18, 19. So I've done 7 shootouts, 2 Clover Creek Invitationals,
Hmm.
an XFC, Joan All. I've done the very first IMAC World Championships back in 2014,
Hmm.
and then the Invitational. So yeah, they certainly add up, and I must say, I love it in America.
Yeah.
It is great. The atmosphere, and the camaraderie in amongst, aero modelers, not just IMAC guys, but just aero modelers in general. I
Hmm.
think it's quite warming and forthcoming that I thoroughly enjoy it, knowing that I'm going to go over there and have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you, you've been over here enough. You can almost go for dual citizenship, huh?
Yeah, pretty close to it.
No doubt. Hey, I noticed that at the Invitational that everybody got them a little koala bear on their propellers. How did you start that little tradition?
So that started all from my first Tucson shootout. We just, we knew that we had heard that Americans, tend to like them sort of, gimmicky little bits and pieces from other people's countries. Um, and my sister back then, she was only about 6 years of age, and we've gone out, obviously out shopping and seen these little gimmicky clip-on koalas, and we bought them in the first shootout. Even beforehand,
Mhm.
my parent, we went and did Disneyland and then Vegas. Obviously, first time for us as a family overseas. And we'd just have one clipped on our shirt, and the amount of people say, "Oh, that's so cute," and you just give them away. And then so it's just kind of stuck as a bit of a tradition over the years. So, IMAC events, I'll go around and I'll start just clipping them on random people's propellers and everything. Um, Probably the best one I ever did was back 2012. When I went to Clover Creek, I took over a heap of koalas, and in it John and Tina Schroeder's the party barn and through the house, when no one was around. I'm literally just randomly going around clipping koalas everywhere. And poor Tina, like, this is 4 or 5 years down the track, and she's still finding koalas everywhere.
uh,
So yeah, it's just been the sort of thing that's just people just started noticing, and yeah, just sticking with it.
well, very good, very good. I heard a couple people say, "Oh yeah, that's every contest we see these koalas pop up."
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's gives everyone a bit of a good laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you come over here and compete, what are the struggles and stuff that you have to go through to get over here to arrange to bring a plane or arrange a plane or what all do you have to do for that?
So early on in the piece, it wasn't too bad. Traveling overseas with the models, so predominantly for us, obviously on Australia, we're to the west of the US. Anything on the west side of the US is relatively easy. Well, was relatively easy. So basically, I got some very large metal crates. So you strip your aeroplane down, engine has to come out, fuel tanks all have to come out, and you basically have to have the aeroplane completely sterilized.
Mhm.
So the box ends up basically being fuse goes in the box, cowl off, rudder off to get as short as you can with the length. So predominantly trying to fit the length on aircraft's normally around about 2.4 meters in a cargo hold. So the length of our fuselage is around about 2350 by the time you build the box. So it's really, really tight. So you'll have one box where you'll put that all in, and then you'll do another box for your wings and your stabs. They'll all go in there. And then you have to send your engine over separately. So I'll normally send my engine to DA, turn up to the airport as usual. I never get old of it. You go to the airport and you try to warn the airlines that, hey, I'm bringing these boxes, making sure that everything's all sorted out. But the moment you turn up, it's like all hell's broken loose. You're seeing these crates there, and they're freaking out on if they're going to fit through the conveyor belts, and it can be quite a stressful task, getting an airplane on board. And then obviously you've got the other end. You get off the airplane and you're trying to navigate, and if you're taking two models, like if you take an IMAC model and a freestyle model, you've got these four large crates and you're trying to navigate them sideways going down through the aisles. It's quite intense. And then obviously you get out and then it's like, righto, the van rental company's 5 miles away. How do you get these four massive crates to a van rental place? So, I'm pretty fortunate. LAX normally has like shuttle buses. Mm-hmm. So literally I just quickly jump on a shuttle bus, offer the bus driver $100. I'm like, mate, here's $100. Just if you're able to get us to where we need to, that'd be appreciated. Mm-hmm. So that's normally anything on the West Coast. You can kind of get away with that. However, I am aware that things are starting to get a little bit more difficult. I think it was just without all the COVID stuff that's happened, I had some contacts in it, some of the airlines, and they've all started not doing their oversized baggage in-house. They're now getting a third party to go and do it, so things are getting a little bit more difficult. Anything, though, in the Central America or even on the East Coast is even more difficult, because what you're doing is you're trying to rely on having a flight. You really need to fly directly straight to wherever you're going. To try to transfer internally with large boxes, aircraft companies, our airliners are just very much like, yep, not happening, can't get it on board, won't happen. So for us in Australia, we're very limited to where we can fly directly to. So I know I can fly directly to Los Angeles or I can fly directly to Dallas. So when I did the 2014 IMAC Worlds and I took my models with me, we had to obviously flew direct to Dallas, and then it was like a day and a half's drive from Dallas all the way up to Muncie. Wow, yeah. And for an international, person traveling, and then you got all these big crates, it is an absolute nightmare of logistics. It is so difficult. Look, we're going to be getting a little bit more fortunate. I know that Qantas, one of the Australian airlines, is now, I think as of 2023 or 2024, will be offering direct flights to Chicago and New York. So that will make life a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. But with how things have been changing, traveling wise with boxes, and even like I do the F3A, and a few years ago I did the last F3A Worlds in Italy. Trying to get a box even going through Europe's an absolute nightmare. So you look at your different options. So for me this year with the Invitational, I was looking at how I was going to best handle it, knowing that also I've got other events coming forward. So I looked at several different options of obviously flying directly there. So with not being able to do anything with Qantas, I looked through some other airlines through Asia, where I was looking at having to go Brisbane, Tokyo, New York, and then drive planes, take my planes and drive down from there. However, again, that was just being even more difficult. I looked at shipping an aeroplane over there earlier, and return was going to be $12,000 Australian, which is around about 8,000 US, wow, to send a model there and back, and it's just not justifiable. So I bit the bullet, and I'd been wanting to do it for a while now, and I bought myself a pre-built model over there, which was the Radio Wave MX2, and I was fortunate enough to pick that up through Andrew Jeske.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was literally turn up to the event, and I turned up to Kevin and Al Young's place a few days earlier, and had to finish putting all the gear in and get it all going for the event.
Mm-hmm.
However, obviously, for me now going forward, I've now got an airplane that lives in America that, when the shootout rolls around, I can literally just turn up with my transmitter. I pay to have the airplane. So after the event, I'm having Al box up the plane. And then when the shootout rolls around, I just pay $400-500 to have the crate shipped over to DA. And then it's just a matter of pulling the airplane out of the box, setting up and going. So, obviously, it's still a large expense. As so many IMAC pilots now, I'm trying to think what the conversion rate is at the moment. To go and get an IMAC model over there, but here in Australia to go and outlay a 3 meter model, looking excess of $14,000-15,000. And not everyone has the ability or even has the funds to be able to go and outlay such an expense just to have the aeroplane live over there and only ever use the aeroplane a couple of times a year. However, I'm pretty fortunate, knowing how many events I'm coming over to. It just creates more longevity for me going forward for the next few years. So for me, that's going forward. I don't need to worry about airplanes over there. I've got airplanes that live over there now, and it just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's probably easier on the airplanes too, not having all that travel and hangar rash and such.
Oh, definitely, and even the risk that you have with transporting the airplanes. I had a few years ago for the IMAC Worlds. I had to have my models, because on the way back I wasn't flying back via Dallas. I was flying back via LA. So I had the models FedEx shipped from Dallas to LA, and in that time they've unloaded it off a skip with a forklift, and they pierced straight through the aluminum crates with the forklift blades. Luckily, it narrowly missed the fuselage, but nonetheless, though, it's the company's trying to take responsibility and care with transporting models. It really makes you on edge.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. Well, I tell you what, you flying the MX2 here in the States, is that what you typically flew? You fly in Australia, or what plane do you fly in Australia for IMAC?
So the plane I fly back home for IMAC in Australia is the Radio Wave Giles 202.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same fuse, different wings. Funny enough, I should be able to, because I'm here in my hangar now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I can't spin the camera around. I'll just have a quick little look here. But I can actually see that's my IMAC model right there.
Oh, wow. Very good.
Well, one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the predominant one that I fly.
Oh, very good. Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of people like that JTEC the JTEC equipment. So that's a nice plane to be able to fly for sure.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful aeroplane. I've been flying those now for when was my first time I flew one? 2016 Clover Creek. And for me, I've flown many different IMAC models over the years, and look, each to their own. But as you would know, every IMAC model has its quirks.
Mm-hmm.
Some things do nice, other things a little bit on the average side. For me, the MX2 and the Giles, they're very similar to each other. The only thing that I find personally difference between them both, other than the way they look in the air, is I find that the Giles rolls a little bit quicker.
Mm-hmm.
However, for me, it's because I also do the F3A stuff. I find the Giles and the MX fly the closest thing to an F3A model. With keeping within the 10% rules and the adjustments to the aircraft, it literally just feels like flying a big pattern model, and the mixes that I have in it are significantly less. Some, depending on whichever MX that I've actually got, or Giles of the ones over the years that I've flown. Some of them I don't even have any knife edge mixing in because I don't need
Wow.
anything.
Wow, that's tremendous.
Yeah. So for me, it just seems like one of the most neutral models, and as a top pilot, especially, I think probably one of the most crucial things, other than the basic of your lines and your snaps, is rolling circles, and that's where you'll predominantly notice when you're doing your rolling circle. Sometimes the knife edge mix will actually fight against yourself
Hmm.
because what you're doing is. You're not evenly rotating the stick around. You'll be having to input more or less of, your elevator and rudder corrections depending on, what point in the rolling circle you're trying to do, whether you're rolling in or out. So for me, having a model where I literally almost have no knife edge mixing in, it just makes things feel more linear and smooth amongst everything. I'm not having to
Hmm.
fight more one way than another.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I have a question about, you said you fly F3A. Have what kind of obviously you went to the world, so you're flying at a top level. What kind of differences do you find between the IMAC and the F3A, and does the different flyings help each other, or are they completely different to you, or how do you rate that?
Um, Look, for me, I think IMAC and F3A complement each other, and you know what? I'll even throw freestyle in on the mix on that. Like if you look at three different dynamics, okay, even though IMAC and obviously under IMAC, there's the freestyle
Hmm.
category, but flying all three, they complement each other because each one teaches you a different set of skills. I find what I love about IMAC is IMAC teaches you to think on your feet. The unknowns, the complexity of directions are so important and so crucial. Where it doesn't take much to lose points in IMAC. And then obviously there's the F3A, where F3A they used to refer to smooth and gracefulness, and the problem is smooth and gracefulness is it's very subjective.
Right.
It's each person's interpretation. But what I find with F3A is, although some of the sequences, your preliminary sequences are nowhere near as difficult as any of the IMAX sequences, it's more about emphasis on ensuring that the basics are right. Anyone can go out there and fly a roll or fly a 4 point roll, but to really break it down to as clean, as precise as possible.
Hmm.
That's what I like about the F3A is they're really about the finer little bits and pieces. Obviously, then they have the F sequence, which in my mind, the P sequence is probably the equivalent like an intermediate IMAX sequence, where the F3A, the F sequence is more like a invitational slash the invitational event, where you've got a lot of rolling elements, vertical rolling loops,
Hmm.
rolling eights, lay down eights. So it takes a whole nother level of skill in that. Um, for me, comparing them all back and forth, they all complement each other. And I feel that if you look around the top pilots out there in the world, you know, fly both because they complement each other.
Hmm.
It really is it's really different. I suppose obviously there's as usual in anything else, that when you're looking at different variations of different things that you're competing in, the rules are very different, between IMAC and F3A with regards to their judging criteria, what they're looking for, and how they looking for things. But I think to anyone out there that's wanting to get into aerobatics, whether you're going down an IMAC route or an F3A route, you can't go wrong. But obviously, when you starting to get towards the top end and you're wanting to push yourself that little bit more, I highly recommend to anyone to give the other discipline a go. Even not necessarily having to jump right into and going all out as full competitions or even buying a full competition model. But, for anyone out there who wants to better themselves, I highly recommend giving, either of the disciplines that you don't fly a go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with you. I enjoy flying both of them myself. What F3A model are you flying currently?
So at the moment in competition, I'm flying a Huayang Advantage,
Mm-hmm.
and then I've also got a one of the AJ Aircraft Proteus Bipes through CA Models. I haven't flown them for a few months now. So this year's the year that they're doing the team trials for the F3A Worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and the way Australia's doing it is they're breaking it up into two events 6 months apart of the year. So I had my first team trials back in March, and my next one's now happening in the beginning of September. So I haven't flown my models now for since March, because after the team trials, I then focus more on getting things ready for the invitational practicing back here.
Yeah.
So the Proteus, I'm still a little bit new to the Proteus. I only finished it about a month before the team trials, so I'm really flying both of them back to back, and I'm working out which one I'm going to end up liking more. And then going into next year's F3A Worlds, which is being held in Australia for the first time after 32 years.
Wow.
It's going to be held. So I want to make sure whichever one of the two that I'm going to like, I'm going to end up buying a second one and be fully set up for the
Mm-hmm.
next World Championships. So for me, predominantly, I mainly fly bipes. Over the years, I've flown a lot of the mainly monoplanes. I've flown the BJ Craft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, they're not nice aeroplanes. However, at the last Worlds, I had the opportunity to buy Andrew Jeski's accuracy pipe that he flew in the contest. And after buying it and putting it together and flying it, I was like, I thought F3A motos flew great,
Mm-hmm.
and they do, but the bite was just a whole other thing above. It was like, to me, it's like the best thing since sliced bread. It is just such a true aircraft that I've never flown an aircraft where it feels just as comfortable on knife edge as what it does flying whether you're upright or inverted. So for me, I'm really loving the bipes predominantly in the F3A side of things.
Oh, very good. Yeah, they're becoming. You've
Yeah,
seen a lot more of them around, so they're becoming more popular for sure. Um,
yeah, definitely.
in the other disciplines, have you tried jets or indoor or anything like that?
Rich, I've literally done everything. I've do indoor. I've got jets. I'm getting into a bit more control line. Pylon racing. I've got a pylon model here. I haven't flown yet, but I love
Mm-hmm.
the idea of going out doing pylon. For me, I just live and breathe air and modeling.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, gliders, aero towing, discus launch gliding. Um, yeah, you name it, I do it. I just love it. So at the moment, we're getting ready for an event called the Festival of Aero Modelling. So it's Australia's take on Joan All.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I'm in the process of getting all my models ready to go for that, as well as some models for. Yeah, I'm sure if you might have heard, and several other people have heard of Martin
Uh
Pickering.
huh. Absolutely.
So Martin's coming out. He arrives in a week tomorrow. He's going to be staying with me and flying my models at the event as well, putting on demos. And his partner Raquel is coming out as well, who's a very well known 3D heli pilot. So at the moment, I'm getting all those models there ready for him to fly along with a few others.
Oh, very good. That sounds like this will be a blast.
Yeah, so you can probably see in the video there. I'm currently in my hangar, so you can see all just a portion of the aeroplanes around behind me.
Yeah, I think you have a hangar envious to a lot of people.
Oh, look, I'm very very fortunate. For me, not just flying and building, but I love collecting models. I love collecting anything rare, unique, um, that are one-offs.
Mm-hmm.
That for me, a few years ago, I went to the AMA museum. I was just, excuse me, absolutely gobsmacked by the history of aero modeling there.
Yeah.
Um, and we're in a hobby that sadly it's an aging hobby, and I was only talking with a couple of people over at the Invitational, of some of the pressures that aero modeling groups around the world are going through, with our noise issues and height and so many bits and pieces. And for me, it's about preserving the hobby. I'd love for one day to be able to, having been to that AMA museum, I'd love to be able to recreate something like that here in Australia. Because there is so much history out there, and it's all just disappearing because it's just such a sad point. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm involved with several people in several different committees and involvement around just aero modelling in general in Australia. And I'm very conscious as to what we as aero modelers are going to do to grow the hobby, and get more people into it. Look, for me, collecting all the models, collecting all that sort of stuff for me is, something I enjoy, because for me the hobby has given me so many opportunities in life, that I see. I just don't want so many things to disappear and go away.
Right.
So for me, I like to collect so much of the stuff.
Well, you're going to create your own museum, which won't be a bad thing. I know a lot of our hobby guys. We hear about losing all of our greats here and there, and the people around them. Those models might not mean as much to them, and sometimes they don't get saved, and it's a shame sometimes.
It is. It
But
is. So
tell me, is there any particular accomplishment or contest or anything that you're most proud of?
um, for me, I'm probably the thing that I'm most proud of isn't even necessarily my own flying myself. Um, look, if I'm going to break it down into personal achievements, I think for me achieving, I got sixth at the shootout in Invitational. Okay, sixth, righto, you didn't win it. But for me, that to me has been a decent achievement, because you're flying against some of the best pilots in the
Right.
world. Also there was Clover Creek 2016. I placed third behind Jace Ducey and Gabriel Artus. For me, I was blown away by that, and because again at that point there I was on a borrowed aeroplane. I
Yeah.
literally grabbed a plane 3 days before the contest and went out and fly. And as I'm sure so many top guys out there, to be able to go out and fly at your best, to you need to be on your own aeroplane. You need to be out practicing. You need to be almost fully in tune with the aeroplane. So for me, over the years, I've had to learn to adapt and grab an aeroplane in such a short period of time and just be able to just gel with it within a matter of flights. And I'm very fortunate in that. I was very lucky at, obviously, the Invitational just gone. I test flew the model a day and a half before the event. I know so many of the guys were out practicing for a week before, the Israelis and the Italians, and roll straight into the event. I had 3 flights overall on the event, on the aeroplane, and won the first round. I'm blown away by that. I thought that was brilliant. I was quite happy. I said, right, let's call the contest. We're done. Time to go home. But look, for me, even fourth at the Invitational, I consider that an achievement.
Absolutely.
It's the sort of thing that after so many years, I witnessed so many people get so caught up in, especially people traveling from overseas, going to a big event, expecting to do well. Like, obviously, we all want to do well, but for me, my biggest thing that I say to people going to any sort of world championships is, obviously go there, do the best that you can, and give it your all. But don't be disappointed in yourself if you don't achieve a certain position or a certain place. I think it's go there and enjoy yourself. But anyway, back to the for me, one of my biggest achievement that I feel is back in 2017. It was the Tucson shootout. I was going through a bit of a rough patch many years ago, just with life and everything, and I had these two juniors that I met back in Australia, yeah, at a local flying field, Cameron Robinson and Flynn Wayne. And I took these kids under my belt, and they wanted to get into IMAC and competed, and the opportunity arose for them to come with me to the Tucson shootout. And I had a chat with Kevin Garland, and and we're able to get them both spots to compete in intermediate at the
Wow.
shootout. And these boys so Cam had only been flying IMAC for just over a year, and Flynn had been there a year and a half. And there's these two boys been given a spot, and we've gone to the shootout, and they've again on a borrowed aeroplane. Al Young and Jerry Haley kindly loaned the boys a Radio Wave MX2 to fly, and um, they came first and second
Oh, awesome.
at the shootout, and they and compared to everyone, no third place was not even anywhere near Flynn in second.
Hmm.
It was by the Friday, because they had posted. So the way the shootout, as you would know, works. So they compete. They fly Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They cut to the top five and then fly Sunday. Um, but come Friday, Cam had already won the contest.
Wow.
Cam won that many rounds, and Flynn was that close behind him. It was literally wow. So for me, seeing those two boys get up on that podium as a first and second, that's to me, I feels my biggest achievement is not the fact that I myself was out there flying, but I was able to coach these two boys at 15 years of age to, a 1-2 place at, one of the largest, prestigious IMAC events in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that to me would be what I consider my biggest achievement.
Well, I tell you what, that's probably a lifelong memory for those boys. I tell you, that's incredible.
Oh yeah, and I'm very fortunate that although they don't fly all that much these days, they're now 19 and 20, and they've got girls and cars and all that
Mm.
stuff. However, they always get in regular contact with me, and the flame is still there, and there will come a time where they'll come back to the hobby. But nonetheless, though, it was an experience for them both, and bit of a funny moment of the whole thing. So I'm there, the responsible adult. I was how old was I then? I was 24, and I'm there babysitting these two 15-year-olds, and I'm going through airport security, and they're all goofing around. I'm like, do not at any stage, because we got our controller transmitters with us, and I'm
Yeah.
like, do not at any stage say the word transmitter at the airport. We'll have people falling down from the roof, pointing guns at us. We're not doing it. And these two are winding me up, and I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a nightmare. But, they were great over the entire event. But it came to the prize giving. And, at the shootouts, all the prizes are all up, and you get up and you go and pick something. And I said to the boys, and even their parents said to them both, now you can pick anything, wherever you place, you can pick anything of all the prizes. But you're not allowed to pick an airframe. Because how on earth are we going to try to get my 4 crates plus whatever aeroplanes that you guys get back? Well, they didn't listen to me. Cam picked up an AJ laser. Flynn picked up a Radio Wave MX. And I just, talking about stress through the roof, because I'm not there to control. I was off doing something else at the time. And it's like, oh, right, what you get? And they've come back with these planes. I'm like, oh, boys, you have no idea how much of a headache you have just
No
created.
doubt.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Good kids, though. Good
Oh, that's
kids.
awesome.
So,
That's awesome.
so yeah.
I got one
Yep.
loaded question before I let you go.
Of
Do
course.
you prefer the knowns or unknowns in the? I want to talk about freestyle because I know freestyle is fun, but the knowns or unknowns, which do you prefer in a competition like the Invitational?
For me, I love the unknowns. I love the challenge to be able to have to think on your feet, and I think you were one of the judges in the chair where you picked up my zero in
Yeah,
the unknown where I've pulled instead of pushed on the
yeah,
Humpty. But and I landed and I'm like fist bump. I'm like, yeah, I've done so well on this, so good. And Bree, my caller, love her to bits. She's like, I don't know, why you're so happy. You stuffed up the double Humpty. I'm like, what on earth are you on about? I nailed that unknown. And then she showed me that, it was on I pulled instead of push, and I'm just kicking myself. But nonetheless, even with that error, the unknowns, I love the unknowns.
hmm
That ability to think on your feet, and it really the unknowns at the Invitational. I think it was the second unknown that we flew. My opinion was the most difficult of them all. Where there was a lay down Humpty bump, where you're flying along, you're pulling to the 45, you're doing, I think it was a 1 1/4 snap to knife edge,
hmm
and then it was a knife edge radius down towards the
Right,
ground and then a
right.
snap. But as you're doing this radius, it was a half roll integrated over the whole thing. So you're rushing around this, and it's so important of maneuver placement that you don't end up getting stuffed up. And I noticed a lot of the pilots there that we're competing against never fully took into consideration positioning of maneuvers. And I think there was about 3 pilots who did the Humpty and then the snap on the ground. And again, they had to then pull out 135 out to upright.
Right.
And they panicked. They were too low and they just had to bail out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, unknowns, I reckon, are king. Unknowns is really what determines, how good of a pilot you are. Not just that, but how good of a caller you have. Because your caller is just as important as you as a pilot. They're the person that can either make or break you on where you end up placing and what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I know as a judge, that's one of the greatest challenges too, because everything's coming at you so fast, and you don't want to miss something major. But the third unknown in the Invitational, the last day, it was. I'm sorry, the second unknown the last day. You flew
Yep.
before Sasha, and I have to say, your flight and Sasha's flight were the two most perfect unknowns I think I've ever seen. I know I scored you two as high as I've ever scored anybody in a tough unknown, and that was brilliant flights, and that's the reason why I asked you the question because you just look like you really enjoyed that flight. It was really spot on.
Yeah, I remember you coming, letting me know at the end of the that round, after everyone finished, and that unknown, I actually remember that unknown. I was so happy with it. The ability with flying an unknown is to fly it as if it and present it as if it's a known. It's like you just need to know it like the back of your hand.
Yeah,
And yeah, so no, that's a very valid point. For me, it's got to be the unknowns.
right. Well, very good. Well, it certainly shows. So, if people want to find you on social media or message you, how do they get a hold of you?
Look, so on social media, it's on Facebook, Aaron Bones Garle.
Mhm.
Yeah, and literally just shoot me a drop message. I don't. I'll be straight up. I'm not always the quickest when it comes to responding. Obviously, when you're owning a business,
Mhm.
that takes up a lot of your time. However, I always like to make sure I get onto people and have a bit of a chat. Yeah, literally, if there's anyone's got anything or would like to know anything or even ask me about how I do anything, more than happy to shoot me a message. The way I see it is the more, I'm always happy to help people out because, people over the years took the time to help me and even look for my father. My father grew up through a broken up family, so he never had the father figure around through his teenage years. And Aero modelers took in my father and basically were there as that father figure. So for me, they gave their time to my father, who in turn obviously taught me to fly. So for me, if there's anything I can ever do to help anyone, you know, through the hobby, it's my way of giving back to those who helped give me an opportunity.
Well, that's terrific. That's
So yeah,
terrific. Well, very good. I'll put some links in the show notes so people can find you. And I really appreciate you taking the time. It was a pleasure to talk to you and a pleasure to see you at the Invitational. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
yeah. Thank you very much for having me, Rich, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A very special thanks to my good friend John Gros, who wrote the song Deep in the Mud that is used as the show bumper music. Check him out on his website, www.johnpapagros.com. A link is in the show notes. See you at the next episode.